Hi and welcome to this webinar on Global English in the English language teaching classroom, and we're going to be focusing in particular on the secondary students as well as some young adults in our classes. So the material we'll be looking at in closer detail later on in this session will be from the 6th level Flash on English course by Ellie Publishing. I'm Andy and my details are there at the bottom of the slide and will be shown at the end. Please email me with any comments, feedback or questions, and there at the bottom is the email address for my international colleagues if you want to find out more about the materials. And in this session what we're going to do is we're going to just, well, in a certain kind of order, but as we go, touch on the fact that we are dealing with a global skill. English, as I keep saying in my sessions and anywhere I go, and where everybody in training will always pass on the message that this is not a subject for the classroom. English, it's a skill, and it's a life skill, and in many cases it's actually a skill that employers will take for granted. They'll just assume you've got English. What are you going to do with it apart from communicate? So we'll be looking at the kind of content that we need to give students to be talking about and learning about, instead of just absorbing grammar lessons and vocabulary lists. That's not going to help anybody if all they have is language with nothing to say about it or learn. We're going to be looking at culture. Of course, we know that English is a global language, therefore that has implications on what we're exposing to the students and how they can then look back on their own culture and compare and contrast and work with English in a world that's diverse and ever more in need of tolerance as well. So we'll look at some of the materials that will help students use their English to explore other cultures. By clil we mean content and language integrated learning, clil in other words. So the way we bring in other subjects from the curriculum into our English language teaching classroom. Again, the globality of English suggests really that we don't really want to teach English in isolation in the old-fashioned way where it's just grammar and vocab lists. That's not meaningful or purposeful, and students really need to be exploring the world around them and in English too, because that's their reality. The reality of lingua franca English is they'll be working and studying in English at some point in their lives, even if it's fairly informally so. And literature, of course, is another very powerful way to get students to understand other cultures, to embrace other lives. Of course, we know this. We'll mention some of the graded reading that we can bring into our classroom as well. And as we look at the materials from Flash on English, looking at other subjects and other cultures, we'll also find a way to sort of use literature as a vehicle for doing that too, and to learn that really English texts are not just for translation. They have a purpose. They have a purpose of giving us information, or in the case of literature, telling us stories so that we can respond and figure out what we would do in those situations, and some critical thinking skills along the way. We're going to look at some examples of how these things come across in the classroom using the 6th level course Flash, but I'm also going to pick out certain pages and see how you could exploit those pages instead of just going from one section to the next, which is kind of, well, it's a bit dry really, isn't it? And students don't really want to go from exercise to exercise until the lesson's over. Otherwise we'll make it all feel very boring and academic. So we'll look at ways to pull out examples from the course book, and in fact you can apply those ideas to all sorts of materials too. And again, along the way, I'm going to keep reminding ourselves as teachers that we really have to look at resources out there and our CPD, our continuing professional development. How much, for example, do you really look online to not just find a few activities that you can do for drama in the classroom or for teaching a grammar point, but how much can you, or do you spend, how much time do you spend on reading blogs, magazine articles, even doing some online courses? And there are some there we can look at in a moment, to really look at, what is it we're doing when we teach English? Are there other ways that I could approach this, not just by activities or tasks, but actually to examine the mindset that we have? How do we approach our classrooms? Do we really teach English, or do we really want to be coaching communication? Because coaching communication in a global world is really what we want our students to be able to do with their English. I mean, for example, if you have perfect English and you go out into the world, does that make you a great communicator? And of course, we know that having good language alone isn't really the end of the story. So as a teacher, we have to keep, I don't know, if you can't go to conferences because it takes time or they're expensive, look online, look at the materials out there. Some of them you pay for, some of them are free, by many experienced teachers and trainers who are sharing their best practices. And it's our job, it's our duty to give our students the best we can from what we've learned by others around us. And I really emphasize that point because many of the things that I tell teachers in workshops and conferences, or even in this webinar, have really come from other sources. It may be my spin on the idea, but we really have to look around and share what we see others doing. And in that sense, these are universal practices that we talk about in these webinars. So English is the lingua franca. It means that people are going to use English. Your students will learn to use English outside the classroom for all sorts of purposes. And we know that, and that's not new, but how do we really do this in the classroom? Do we really let students see, if we can, from lesson to lesson, that this is not just a grammar lesson. This is not just a series of lexical items for a memory test on Monday. I really feel strongly that we should be coaching students continually to see that this is a skill. It's not a subject for school. And I've said in other sessions, really, that if you were a swimming teacher, would we really spend so much time examining what makes up water, what makes things buoyant? Or wouldn't we really get students swimming more often? And in fact, allowing for the fact that some students are better swimmers than others. Some of them like the shallow end more than they like the deep end. And there's this one size fits all that really doesn't work in classrooms, and we know that it creates all sorts of problems with a natural problem of mixed abilities, and we're going to look at how that can be handled later. But the students are going to work using English in many ways, even if it's not, you know, high-end, cutting-edge, high-flying executive positions. They will have to communicate with other people in English. They're going to have to study in English. They may want to, or at least they're going to find that a lot of the information they need out there, whether it's academic or whether it's purely vocational, is going to be often in English. So we have to expose the students to the sort of things that they will encounter in the workplace and in studying in English. If they travel, or if people are traveling in their own country, wherever you are, the chances are they're going to need to communicate in English. And all of these things, I realize, are very, very obvious, but there's such a danger, I think, in many lessons where this becomes like a token idea behind a text, and then we go straight back to the grammar lesson, and then a test, and then the workbook, and then it reduces English to this list of rules and words, and we don't want that, really. We have to do it, but that's not the end in itself. So we are teaching a skill, and I often say to teachers, we are communication trainers. It sounds grand, but it's true. And if we are just teaching English as an academic subject, well, there are very few students who are really going to understand that or like it. We like it, but we've got to keep showing them it's a skill, and not just doing the 4 skills because that's what English teaching is. It's what is the content when we speak? What is the content we're using when we write and respond? So, of course, culture is a key part of any English language teaching curriculum, because if we're going to be using English, we're going to be using it not necessarily to go and visit Britain or the United States, although there is a place for teaching, you know, the cultures and festivals and traditions of places where English is the mother tongue, but that's, of course, not really the aim, because a lot of students may never want to or ever go to those countries. They may find themselves in India or even places like Japan, where English is not even necessarily a common language for the government, like administration English in India or the Philippines or the Caribbean. In places where English is simply being used as a foreign language for communication, what does it mean to understand culture? And it means not just knowing that certain people dress in certain ways or have different belief systems. It's knowing how their approach to the way they may see a situation no matter how good their English, could impact on the way the communication is successful or not between other students. But in our course books, what we need to do is show the students, and remember, they're young adults, they're curious, they've got to learn about other worlds around them. They tend to think their own world is the right one, but we're teaching them that there are other worlds, festivals, traditions, belief systems, and we are living definitely in a time where people are questioning, even criticizing other people's belief systems and values. And as we approach culture in the classroom, we'll see that the students can look at what other people believe and have their own value systems from family to family, region to region, nation to nation, and how that compares with their own. And they must therefore reflect on that as we expose them to those concepts. And the power of showing students and leading them, guiding them into using English as a medium of instruction is really big now. So many universities around the world are teaching their subjects in English. Again, there was always in the past an assumption that if you wanted to study in English, you would have to go to Australia, Canada, United States, or the UK, and now that's no longer the case, and that's fine. It raises the question, of course, who owns English? And it's not the English, it's not the Americans. It's easy to see in many reports that, well, it's a fact. Most of the people communicating today in English are non-native speakers. Okay, so culture, as we were mentioning earlier, isn't necessarily the goal when we are looking at content of people who speak English. And those who study in English are going to be non-native speakers in non-native speaker countries where English is not the first language. And that's perfectly normal now. And EMI, English as a medium of instruction, it's a very, very popular and growing area for a lot of countries who are now keeping students in the country by still offering them courses in English. And CLIL, which is the teaching of other subjects in English in the curriculum at school, is the first part of that. And of course that's more meaningful because we want students not just to be learning English, then yes, the world around them, but they can do so within an academic framework too, to have study skills and to know what it is to think critically about the subjects that they're still doing in the same timetable every day at school. So it makes sense to link the language and skills that they're learning and developing alongside those subjects too. And of course, literature is a fantastic way to balance the language skills that we're doing in the classroom. It's not just reading, of course. When we have literature, we can do listening through the audio. You can also have lots of writing skills to develop responses or writing little reports about the characters. In Flash, on English, there is always an element of literature to introduce students to the different genres, to poetry, to drama, fiction, different kinds of styles of writing, the different kinds of effects that the language is trying to bring out. And it also sends the message to students that literature, that reading is an important part of not just English learning, but also our lives. To read is not just simply to do a text and follow it by questions and translation work. That would be an academic exercise, which is something we have to do for the exams, but reading is its own reward, and it's absolutely critical that in the years at school that students are learning about English, that they learn that reading is important too. And in other sessions that we've done on graded reading, which I'll mention towards the end of this webinar, we encourage students to learn from these books about reading skills, about analyzing text, developing a response, what was the author's intention, and then going on to read on their own terms. Books that they like, books that they understand, and we all know that we have different tastes and levels. At the bottom there I've mentioned decision making and critical thinking. What better platform, what better vehicle for students to have a chance to develop decision making skills and critical thinking than some works of literature. And it needn't be heavy, difficult literature. The texts are very carefully chosen in Flash on English to let students think about what would they do in those situations. The narratives and the characters that we see in different dilemmas always involves considering the behavior of the characters, the actions they take, whether we think they were good or bad behaviors. And this is why we keep that in the language learning syllabus. I mentioned earlier that it's good to find resources out there on our continuing professional development, CPD, just making sure that we are keeping up to date with what other teachers and trainers and authors say about what we're doing. Here's some articles which come from an excellent magazine for teachers called English Teaching Professional, ETP. And there is a quotation from one of the articles on using literature that talks about learning that the text for students is only a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. So often we introduce a text and the students really don't go any further from the text than to answer some questions, gap fill, sentence matching, and those are important things to a certain extent because of the things we need to prepare them for in the exam. But literature is one of the most important things where we have to see and show the students that it's not just the text in itself that we want to analyze. We want to know about the message behind it and the responses too. I noticed recently there was some online courses. Some of them are paid and some of them are free. If you look at futurelearn.com, they have some interesting courses on all subjects of everything. I mean, not just education. And I saw one here pop up recently. This is a 5-week course. It's not every hour of every day. You do a couple of hours a day, I think, for a few weeks, on how to teach your subject in English. And that's done in association with Cambridge Assessment. And there's another one there from FutureLearn on exploring, English language and culture. Perfect. That's 4 weeks, just doing 2 hours a week. So, you could just chip away at that course and you get all sorts of ideas. And those actually are really good courses because, like a lot of these online courses for the community, they have an enormous amount of comments from other people taking part in the courses. So you can start to converse and communicate with other teachers or users of these courses. And that's what we want. We want a community of teachers too. Often we work in isolation, we have a staff room and that's it. But this is a great way to learn more about our subject and actually engage with others who are in the same boat. So teaching teens and young adults, what LE Publishing have done is they created a 6-level course called Flash, and it goes from A1 to C1, starting at the beginner level, and takes us all the way through. It's absolutely critical that the topics are high interest to motivate the students, to let them know that there are things going on in their own world which also can be compared with other teens in other cultures, which is what the contents deal with. And it's a communicative course, so at every opportunity through the input of new language, students are using the language as much as possible. So it has a full syllabus, all the levels of grammar integrated with the skills, and also a very strong element on differentiating the levels, getting students to work in their own different abilities and learning styles. So it has a flexible approach, and of course that's what we really want. We don't really want to go from page to page. There are some things we need to go back, maybe revise and pick and choose as we see fit. And I'm going to look at that too, where we can pick out certain things from a page and do quite a lot with what looks like a very small amount that is on the page. There are 10 units in every level, and each unit delivers the language first of all through some reading, so different kinds of text like newspaper articles, magazines, brochures, blogs, quizzes, questionnaires, that kind of thing. And then you have listenings, which are dialogues, and in the first 3 levels we're dealing with characters who are at a drama school, and they work in an arts centre, a culture centre. So that again, through dialogues with real characters, we have a chance there to have a vehicle for the language and skills that go on in a context that's related to the cultural and the literary themes that we talk about throughout the units. So we have texts to start off, and then we have the dialogues there. So that's the language input that we use in Flash. And all throughout the course we have this real world emphasis, these other cultures, these other characters, and of course an attention to certain elements of spoken English, things that we know that we'll say in English but we won't necessarily write. So we'll pick a few examples from there later. lots of chances to recycle the language. And flash forward is a really neat little idea which we'll look at, where if some students finish earlier than others, there's a part in every unit where the students can, if they say, look, teacher, I've finished, what do we do now? Well, they can go to this part called flash forward, and they can get on with some more relevant work whilst the rest of the class catches up. And as I said, these three elements go right through the course. At the end of the units, consolidating the language, we have clil, the other subjects in English, and then we have culture and literature. So we'll pick out some of those examples too. And the book is fully digital, and we'll have some examples at the end of where you can download the book and have it put on your whiteboard or flip through on your mobile device. It's been really popular that with many teachers around the world that I've encountered who are using Flash in its split editions. Sometimes they want an intensive course, or sometimes with this, you can't finish. The term finishes before you finish the book, and that would make people feel that they hadn't really got the most out of a book they've got. So the split editions give a chance for students to have 5 units and 5 units, and that goes for the first 5 levels up to upper intermediate. Now, the resource pack for the teachers is very comprehensive. It looks at the rationale behind Flash, the communicative and the mixed ability approach around all these themes that we've captured in cultural and clil based content, and lots of tests and worksheets that you can photocopy, and other resources that will allow you to kind of maybe go over some of the units again, or to add some extra practice. And there's a disc in the teacher's resource pack called a multi-ROM, and that it produces Word document tests that you can adapt as well and print out, so you can make your tests more adaptable for your own classes with the audio and the answer key in the teacher's resource pack as well. And what I thought I would do is, just before we look at some examples of Flash, I'd like to quickly show you an interview that I did with Luke Prodromo, the lead author of Flash, and see what he was saying about the kinds of things that he wanted to put into the classroom through the material, and how he likes to teach young adults and inspire them. So Luke, you wrote Flash, and you had a specific audience in mind. What kind of elements of English language teaching did you want to hand over to teachers for the modern classroom?
Well, that's a good question. It's been a little time now, but if I think back to my experience as an author generally, and then look at this particular course, I became convinced, Andy, that teachers need support, particularly with language. I thought language is my starting point. We are, above all, language teachers, and language is made up. Its basic constituents are grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation, and how you put all that together in discourse to create effective and appropriate communication. So when you look at the pages of a book like Flash, the language element is integrated very obviously with everything else, with the skills, let's say, with a cultural element, with the content. It's not little bits, but the language is a prominent part of those bits. Let's be put it. So I can see now double page spread, and I can see the vocabulary is very clear, the grammar is there, it's beautifully designed by
balanced
the
diet.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted it to be a very thorough, balanced course, both from the point of view of language and content. I mean, I know you're interested in culture, and there's a strong element of that here. But it all begins with language. When you get, for example, to a unit on culture, which usually comes kind of towards the end of a series of lessons, you'll find that the language you began with is there. It may not be as obvious, but it's been recycled. You're focusing on content, you're focusing on culture. And what you've done is you've taken the language that you began with as a starting point, and you've buried it in the material.
Yeah.
So students and teachers will have an opportunity to both focus consciously and explicitly on language in the early pages, through a variety of texts, a variety of activities, and all the rest of it. But there comes a time when you focus on the real world, let's call it,
Yeah.
which we can call it culture, we call it clil. There's a regular content language integrated element in these books. And I think it was something we always used to believe in. Those of us who've been around a long time, we used to call it English for specific purposes. But now it's called clil. Anyway, it's there. And we've also included things like literature, the cinema as regular features. Because, apart from the serious business of understanding the world in which we live, from the point of view, of science and geography and the school subjects, if you like, there's, occasions where we like to relax and, entertain ourselves through things like literature or film.
Yes, I like those features, by the way.
It's a fairly balanced course.
The literature feature is very strong. Yeah.
And integrated. I always liked the idea of what we used to call task dependency, where in order to do B, you've already done A. Wherever possible, I always thought that was a nice principle, a good rule of thumb to making material flow. And the course could have been called Flow. Flash is a more flashy title.
Yeah.
Flow, I would
Flow's
have liked
good.
as well.
Yeah.
I know it's got all kinds of connotations, perhaps, which we don't want. But anyway, this flow, I always used to like, when I saw good lessons, when I saw really good teachers in action, what often struck me about their work was that they seemed to flow nicely from one stage of the lesson to the other. Their relationship with the students had this nice flow as well. They integrated the pupils they had in front of them with the material. So as you were saying earlier on, you have a plan. The book is clearly structured. You could say you have a lesson plan if you want it, step by step.
Yeah.
But you can drift off. A good teacher is always aware of the students in the classroom and how to connect the material to those students. So when you're tired, haven't had time to prepare, you can follow the material. It's a good guide. It's a good prop.
Right.
But when you're feeling fit and creative and aware of your learners, then I think it gives you a nice basis, a starting point, if you like, because the topics are kind of well chosen for teenage students, let's say, to improvise a little bit more, to be more creative, to do other things, project work or digital work, to flip your material, if you like, or whatever it is you fancy. So it's flexible.
Not only is English a lingua franca, but I like the way that in Flash it does actually touch on this as a subject in itself, because I think it's quite interesting to let the students explore the facts around global English. And here we have some articles here on what it is by certain people, what it means for them to use English as a global language, some texts in the actual course that will really make it real and make students see that other people are using English too. It isn't something they just did for the exam, and that's often what they feel is the reason that they learn English. Here's a nice little piece that was in the course on accents. It's interesting. People talk about British English. Oh, we want to learn British English. Do you? Well, we're all assuming that means the Queen's English, doesn't it? But it isn't going to be like that. For one thing, there are so many people now in the catering industry, like Starbucks or even in your local pizza restaurant, they could be speaking with Italian English or Eastern European varieties of English. I live in Glasgow. That's British English, and some of it's very difficult to understand. And people go, oh yes, Andy, of course. No, British English, I mean like the Queen's English. Yeah, okay, but it's very rare to hear that. So whilst a production model is excellent, and we want students to maybe speak like the Queen or like a very good received pronunciation, that's not really what they're going to hear. And also, I think it's a fascinating topic, and maybe relevant to other people's languages too, in how we judge what people say, the way that they speak. If you hear a Birmingham accent or a Liverpool accent or an accent from the southwest, like from Cornwall in England, or from Texas, or from a New York Bronx accent, or it could be so many different accents, and the sociolinguistic judgments we place on them, and that's a really good subject to talk about. For one thing, you could expose the students to different accents, And also you can look on YouTube as well to find so many examples there, and let the students hear the differences and how does it sound to them, and then they can examine their own language and think, well, what about the north of their country, or the south of their country, or the east or the west, or certain cities. And of course, not only is that interesting, but it also reassures students that the same things happen in English that happen in their own languages, and that makes us realize that we're all connected. We're all human beings communicating the best we can. So although the language can actually vary in detail and grammar rules and lexical items, I think when you're a kid and you're a young adult learning about the world and languages, and you're only really learning at school, it's very, very powerful to make that connection with what you think is something in your course book with your teacher, but know that actually people out there are also very similar to you, if only on the outside they look different or sound different. So what does your English really sound like? Yeah, that's interesting. That's a nice little article there from Flash on the sounds of English. Have you ever asked the students what their favourite word is? Sometimes you might say to them, you know, what's your favourite sounding word? Okay, so I mean, what's yours, for example? Think to yourself, what is your favourite English word? Not because of the meaning, but because of the way it sounds, you know? I can think of that in different languages. What is a word that you like the sound of? And it's a nice little activity to ask the students. It's interesting what they might tell you. I wonder what yours was. And so here we have some exercises where the students can then think about the accents that they've heard or the language that they know, create responses in them or judgments, and to listen here. And in the Flash audio we have some different accents that they can listen to and think about there. Choose from the list of attitudes from each speaker, so we can see in the text there in the audio that certain attitudes were revealed in the way they speak. Beautiful. Now let's take a look at one of the units. Here, not in entire detail, but I want you to sort of see what it looks like to a student's point of view. They look at this and they go, okay, wow, there's a lot of English on here. These are, by the way, these black icons with the headphones and the ticks, they're not in your print course book, but I was using here something from the digital book. And in the digital version of the book, it's interactive, and I can play these, click on these icons, and I can listen or do the exercises and get marked. So that's the only reason you can see these. And you see a unit like this, and it's, you know, it's important that there's a balanced diet of grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation and skills and some exercises. But of course, I wouldn't go launching into that. I always encourage teachers to sort of look, what is my goal here? What's my first aim? And I don't want to overwhelm the students with everything they see on the unit. I want them to sort of, well, I want to control, you know, just one part of this. Maybe use the digital book and show just one part of it on the screen and hide the rest, because so many students are starting to do it, you know, they've got their heads down and you don't know what they're looking at. Keep it really focused. Let them only look at one thing, like this picture. Okay, so I went into the course book there, and look, I just cropped out those boys there from that picture, and I put this up. And that, instead of opening up the course book one day and saying, hey guys, we're doing this, let's get going, here's English, you could just show that picture. You've cropped it from the book. Maybe you took a little photograph from the course book and you show it, and let them wonder. You know, kids, teenagers are curious. What are they doing? Ask some questions, or maybe ask the kids to ask each other questions. You know, what are they wearing? Where are they from? Which country could it be? Are they going to school? Are they going to do sport? What sport could it be? So we really want, I mean, that's the aim for, you see this in course books, the picture there gets the students engaged. But the problem of showing the whole course book unit at once, no matter which course book you use, is they're going to be overwhelmed. They can see all this work ahead of them. So I wouldn't do that. I would just show them this for now. And yeah, it takes a bit of preparation, but not much. And then I'm going to get them to think about the little slogan, the little caption there that was on the advert. Our vision of the future, to use football to change the world. Street football world. What does that mean? So you've got them thinking about this. Could be a team that's going to play football. They look like they're in maybe an African country, and that's all you can really get from there. Then you change the next dynamic of the conversation, or the plenary with the group. We're not working in little pairs at the moment. We're asking the group our vision of the future, football changing the world. Now, I think it's fair to say that there are more boys interested in football than girls. That doesn't mean girls don't like football, to be really clear, but statistically I think there are many boys at school interested in football, and that's another topic we can really use to keep them interested. And what could that mean, using football to change the world? And you could brainstorm the ideas. So we're not in the course book yet, not really. They're not looking at questions and answers and wondering what's next and whether the workbook will be difficult. All we're doing is just showing them these pictures, engaging, activating some language, and we're going to be giving them 6 questions to think about. Do you agree or disagree with these statements? Give reasons why and why not. There you go, have a little look there. Football's a beautiful game. They call it the beautiful game, don't they? Kids can play football, learn other things. Football can help us learn foreign languages. There's a very good book actually out there, a novel. I think it's called Bamboo Goalposts, if you look it up, about a man who is now a journalist, a sports journalist. I think he lives in China now. And when he went travelling as a young man, he took a football with him around Brazil and parts of South America, I think. And his thinking was, I'll carry my football with me when I walk into places where I think it might be quite dangerous, because it's a very non-threatening thing to do, isn't it? If you carry a football, not everywhere, but if you carry one, and of course, otherwise local threatening people or threatened people didn't come up to him and give him a hard time. They said, look, can we have a game of football? And he would play, or he'd say, do you want to play? So it was a very, very cool way of breaking the ice. And I think that book, Bamboo Goalposts, talks about how he used football to sort of break down barriers between cultures, especially gang cultures, but I haven't read it for a long time. Look it up. There might be extracts in there you can read out to your students. Here's an extract from the book here. Let me just play that now, and listen to what the book says about this picture.
Exercise 2.
What is Street Football World, and what does it do?
Well, we created Street Football World in 2002 because we believe that football can change the world.
How big is the organisation?
We've now got more than 80 members all over the world.
So, what do you do exactly?
Well, football is a beautiful game, but we believe it is more than just a game. We can use football to change the world. For example, to protect the rights of children or to improve opportunities for kids all around the world.
But how does football help?
Well, football brings kids together to play, but it's also an opportunity for kids to talk about their problems so they can understand them and find solutions.
So kids play football and learn other things at the same time?
Yes, that's right.
And you've been doing this since 2002?
Correct. In 2006, we celebrated the Street Football World Festival 06 in Berlin, Germany.
Street Football World Festival 06?
Yes. Let me give you an example of what we've been doing. In 2006, during the Football World Cup in Germany, 24 teams of young people from all over the world took part in a festival of education, culture and football. The boys and girls were all participants of organisations using football to solve problems.
Were all these kids football players?
They played football, but we didn't choose them because they were the best football players. All the kids want to solve social problems. And, at the festival, there was a competition with mixed teams of boys and girls and no referees. The players solved problems through dialogue between the players.
No referees? It sounds great. Really cool.
So after we've done the audio, there's various exercises and activities we can do to use that listening input. But I thought I'd pick out here something which is quite common in the Flash course, is this attention to spoken English. And here we're looking at the word so helps to make conversation. So we use so to connect sentences, start a new topic, and asking for confirmation. And so there's just this little micro activity there that is in Flash to help just spice up the conversations a little bit, make them more natural, and attend to the spoken elements of language. Make this dialogue more natural by adding so in two places. It was a great game today. Partner B says, do you think we're going to win the cup? We may do, it depends. Well, do you fancy going out for coffee? Yeah. Let's go to that new place in town. Okay, it's not very expensive. Friends went and they really liked it. Are you ready? So where would you put the so? Where would your students do that? And then of course you can listen at the bottom there and compare it. Now we have a nice unit there on the people in the Inuits in Greenland, Siberia, Canada, and there again, you've got a series of pictures there and some texts. And again, so rather than just going straight into the students looking at all that and hoping that they can follow you, is you could pick out those pictures, maybe get the students to say some things about the pictures. You can see some husky dogs there, you can see a whale, or is it a seal? Oh yeah, you've got seals, and there's problems there probably about seals and their endangered lifestyle. You've got igloos, brilliant. Okay, maybe get the students to, you can make a worksheet out of that, or you could put it up on the walls. You could put pictures on the walls that have the text, and they've got to match the text. Or maybe some students have got the picture of the igloos, and some of them have got the ones with the dogs, and some students don't have pictures, they have simply the texts, and they've got to go around and find the right person with the matching text and the picture, and then they have to sort of maybe talk about it. And so recreating the unit would be a great start, and then you can go back to what it says in the unit about the language. If you look there, there's a nice part on study skills. Again, we mentioned earlier that we are really teaching other subjects in English. I mean, it's one thing to learn English, but don't we really want the students to learn something about the world? And here we are learning about all these people and very different lifestyles. Over there in the listening, there's about sort of day-to-day life of an Inuit boy. So we're going to compare his life with our lives, and a chance there to sort of do some cross-cultural comparison there as well. A better world. There we go. So here we have an environmental topic, and what I've done here is you can see lots of language work is going to lead on from these pictures, and a nice little blog there, I think, on if the world were a village. So I just cropped out those pictures, A, B, C, D, and then I'd ask the students to think about, look, there's some problems in the world, the environment, and some global issues here at play. What can they see? What are the problems here? And let them sort of give you some ideas. Pull out the language. Let them tell you in their own language, and then translate it. Not everything has to be in English, I don't think. Or I might just sort of support them a bit more and show them the 4 different choices that come up in the book. And this is, pardon the pun, it's a world away from showing them this, which is a course book page. Fine, it's just a menu of goodies of English to show them. Pick out a few things to get them warmed up, activate the language. That's what the unit does, except I don't show the whole page necessarily. You might have your own preference or your own ideas. How would you start a topic like this? You've got some pictures here. Maybe if you want to go online and find something that is related to hunger, natural disasters, pollution and homelessness, what could you find on YouTube, for example? Or could you find other photographs? Could you find photographs of things happening in your own country? And let that be your leading in point to teach the language. Here is it's a sort of website, isn't it? The last century was a century of war, disease, natural disasters. Very cheerful. And then, but it's everywhere. I mean, we have to be talking now more than ever before about the environment. Not because that's something that you have to teach at school, but because everywhere we look, every day in the news, there is something vital about the environment. It used to be a topic that was in classrooms, I think, because it felt like useful, but now it's part of our lives. How we eat, the plastic that we use, the waste that we increase in numbers over the years with the wastage in our world and the things that we throw away. How can we recycle? Vegetarianism, veganism, I mean, all of these things now are day-to-day topics. They live alongside us, and there is a great example of how we can take a website from the course book and exploit the language and look at statistics here. You know, that would be a very interesting thing. If the world was just 100 people, what would the numbers be? That's a nice one there. Wow. 60 people in the village would be Asian, so 60% of the population of, wow. 50-50 men and women, that's okay. Wow, 33 people. If the world were just 100 people, 33 people would suffer from malnutrition. Alright, so there's a lead in to that very serious topic. This is what I mentioned earlier about flash forward. This is the part of the course where in every unit there is an element where if the students finish early, they can do something else which is still related to the topic. Which of these would be surprising or worrying? Write some notes about things you feel grateful for in your life. That's a very good idea. A lot of good mental health productivity exercises for everybody these days is to journal a little bit and show what you're grateful for. That's a good thing to teach our kids. There we go. Nice bit of second conditional there. So that's what we're doing in that unit. If the earth were a village, one person would be from Oceania. Would you be happy if you didn't have a roof over your head? So conditional sentences there to get them to use the language, and a flashpoint there. Flashpoint is a way of looking at some of the common errors and problems that come up with learners. There we go. If I were you, if she were here. In spoken English we often say if I was. It's true. Some people just don't know the difference, but I think some people say if I were you or if I was you. It's often a difference between spoken and written English. Getting the students to talk about it, okay? In the end of the unit, we want people to start to communicate with the topic, you know. What are the problems in your country? How could we solve those problems? And here we've got some different suggestions. Build new hospitals, electric cars, create jobs, stricter laws. Now we have a really meaty topic that students can engage in. And they've had all that scaffolded material and content and language put into the unit, and now we're pulling it all together. Study skills, again, is a feature where we get the students to really look at how they might approach it from an academic point of view, the language, the study skills. Take a look at that one for a moment. Reading for specific information, okay, so that's skimming and scanning, looking for things that you need, not really trying to understand and read every sentence. Okay. Critical thinking, again, is a feature in Flash where we get the students to think critically, and there's actually a really good free guide. If you go to the leonline.com website there at the bottom, you can go down there and search for this free guide on critical thinking in the classroom. It's a very important part of our curriculum designs these days, and you'll find that really useful, I think. It'll work alongside any of the materials that you are using in the classroom. Here's a bit of clil. Okay, so we've got history here, I think, discoveries. So let me just quickly drill into that opening part. What I've done again is I've taken that unit. Okay, genius. Do you know why the people in the pictures are famous? So I would probably just take that and see if my students, before they open the books, would understand what's going on here. Maybe they'd figure out there's something to do with discovery, inventions, okay? And you get the guy there on the left, they think, who could it be? The guy who discovered the apple? That would be a joke, but they probably wouldn't laugh. Isaac Newton, gravity there. Archimedes, B. Look, you may not know yourself, that's fine. Use the teacher's book, it'll tell you. But what we want the students to do is look at these pictures and think, right, what's going on here? What do I know? What could I figure out? I don't want them to be looking at this page thinking, oh, right, English. There's a lot of things to do here. I'm looking at the pictures, I'm thinking with the students, what can I elicit from them? What do I think they can figure out? Could they name these famous people? Or if they couldn't name any of them, that's okay. There's a first time to learn everything. Put the names in and then say, oh yeah, Columbus, he's the guy, he travelled, didn't he? He went to places, he discovered America. Or did he? Don't know. Let them find out. You can give them the pictures, give them the names of these people, and maybe this is something they do as a flipped learning. So before they see that unit, you give them this. Maybe you could divide your class into 5 groups, and then they could just go away and do some Googling and look it up in their own language, as far as I'm concerned, and come back to the class with a bit of a summary about what they know about these people. William Webb Ellis, in case you're wondering, he kind of invented it. He's the guy who picked up the football and it became rugby. And you can read about that in the book. The next stage of that unit, what it does is it looks at some examples of things these discoverers or inventors might have said. Okay, so we made it up for the course book. But there you've got 5 matching things. Here, number 5. I was playing football with the other boys at school. The ball was coming towards me. I caught it and ran. That's how rugby started. I don't know why he wasn't disqualified for handball, but he started rugby. I wasn't looking for America. I was looking for India. They have to match them up. But then look, you've got nice little examples of past simple and past continuous. Here's flash forward again, so some kids might finish sooner, so they go, okay, you guys, you can do these 3. If you're allowed to use your smartphone, you could look them up. Maybe they can figure it out, but that's flash forward, where the early finishers can have something to do. And now we see the past continuous and past simple at work, but not just in an isolated grammar lesson. It's related to something in history or geography or biology in some of those cases. He was sitting under the apple tree when the apple fell. Isaac Newton discovered gravity. Okay, genius. I like this. I like some of these cartoons in the book. In the same unit where you're contrasting past simple and past continuous, you can't go wrong with these sort of pictures, can you? There's a nice little picture story, very simple. The woman, she's having a cup of tea, there's a dog, and then someone comes along, but his mate is distracting her whilst the other guy steals the dog. She's horrified, and they are dog thieves. Okay, beware dog thieves. But look, you can get the students to look at those pictures and elicit, what was she doing? Well, she was having a cup of tea. Was it tea? No, she was drinking coffee. Okay. Who was with her? Well, nobody was with her. Oh, yeah, the dog was with her. The dog was sitting there. The dog was sitting under the table, and she was having a cup of tea. And then 2 boys arrived. One of them, well, he was talking to, and you can elicit this conversation from. Now, you're not showing any text. You're not doing any listening comprehensions. You're just getting the students to see the concept. This happened last week. You say it was in the news. Okay, really, teacher? No, not really. We're making it up. It's for learning. But there we have a good example, and then we've got them using the language here, past continuous and past simple, in a nice little cartoon story. And then we can get them talking about the pictures. I quite like that. It's a nice, neat little idea, using the little cartoons to reinforce the language point. Okay, where was she? What was she doing? And there are some prompts to help them. So, I made it really hard there, but you could make it nice and easy for the students with some language prompts. Then they do a diary exercise, for example, looking at somebody's diary from last week. She was making coffee, she was booking a hotel, she was writing letters, nice little activity where students could then look at their own diaries. They could make their own, they don't have diaries, maybe they have sort of online calendars. So they could take their smartphones and they could then look at their calendar and talk about not what they're doing today, but look at what they did last week and make little sentences there. Now that's not, something you haven't thought of, but there's the book. Scaffolding the language work, but doing it first through some clil, some content and language integrated, some other subjects in English, and getting them to use the language there, and then writing about it later. And finally, we mentioned literature is really important, and I think in Flash it has a really nice way of actually doing a nice double page spread where it shows here we have Frankenstein's monster. And in my typical style, and in the style of many teachers, I would look at this and I think, okay, so we've got some background there about Mary Shelley, so that's important because we want the students to know that classic literature was written to convey messages and make us respond to themes. It certainly wasn't written to write essays in the classroom. And that's something we can do here. We can just show that this writer wrote Frankenstein for a reason, and here are some extracts from the novel. What I did here is I would take those pictures, if you can see them, A, B and C, and I put them there, and then get the kids to sort of think, oh, what's this about? What could this be? Oh, he looks like a monster. What monsters do you know in literature? And then, of course, take it from there. And then I could maybe ask them to match up the texts. This idea, these pictures and these texts, I've taken them from the book by clipping and cropping the digital part of the book. But you could take pictures with your phone, okay? And here's an example from another book on literature there, where we have some examples from a summary of Treasure Island and a summary of Lord of the Flies, 2 travel books there. And this whole unit is exploring genre and themes and getting the students to feel that there's different things out there they could read. And I think we really have to accept that students do find reading a bit of a struggle, partly because it's become, well, we could argue that in many schools around the world, reading is not really given as a choice. Everyone has to read the same thing and answer the same questions, and understanding it alone has become just the outcome. And really, we want them to understand easily so that we can respond to the stories and themes, not just to continually translate. So this kind of livens up the idea of literature here and gets them introduced to the idea that reading has all sorts of benefits beyond language. Here we go. There's an activity to get them to think about genres and what they prefer, what they like. Fantastic there. You can get the students to do surveys about literature. And that brings us to the graded readers, which I think are always something we should remember to bring in alongside our course books. And Flash would be perfect because you've got elements of literature at the end of many of the units, and then you have the graded readers from Ellie. Look at the graded readers website and look at all the different genres there and different levels, and try and pick out some that would maybe fit with the theme. For example, there is one there on Frankenstein, not in that slide, but if you look at the catalogue or online, you could maybe find the graded reader, so that when you're going to be doing a unit on Frankenstein in the book, they could be reading the graded reader too. So that's perfect. And of course, Ellie have recently developed a beautiful series with some award-winning titles in there on non-fiction, real kids in real places from around the world, both from mother tongue English countries like Canada and from New York, but also from other countries where English is spoken or learnt as a foreign language, Istanbul, Japan. And that's again something that would really belong alongside the material we're doing on not just content but cultures too. If you go to the ellieonline.com website, you can find out all about Flash, all the components, the main features of the course and how it supports teaching young adults and teenagers, including a way to access some of the audio files and resources. Whether you're a student or a teacher, you just sign up for free and in you go. And if you put a code into the ellieonline.com digital book, you'll be able to see a way on accessing video, you can access audio, you can see all the different kinds of interactive exercises. And here, if you go to the website there, you'll see And if you go to the ellieonline.com website, you can see there all the components and unit. So if you go to the ellieonline.com website, you can see all the main features of the course, 6 levels for young adults and teenagers, including a student area and teachers area if you sign up for free, and you can access many of the different parts of the components, such as the audio. Ellie Digital there, if you go to the digital part of the website, which is here, ellieonline.com/digital book, you put in the code from your book into the right part of the website, and you can then see the digital version of the book and the audio and also the interactive exercises there. Perfect for your interactive whiteboard, as well as teacher resources there in PDF format. So that's it for this session on Global English, and I hope that you enjoyed many of the elements and materials that we showed from the 6th level course Flash. My name's Andy, my email there is at the bottom, and the email for Ellie is international@ellieonline.com, and you can contact your local representative there for more information and possible sample materials from the course. So thank you for joining us, and I'll be with you at the next one.